Gabriel Montero barely had time to take a step out of the cafe before something unexpected paralyzed him. A little girl with curious and intense eyes was staring at him, her lips moving slowly before she uttered a phrase that shook the foundations of his world. "I know you. Your picture is in my dad's wallet." The words reverberated in his mind like a distant echo, but the girl's gaze remained fixed on him, as if she knew something he didn't. A chill ran down his spine, and for a moment, Gabriel felt as if all the air around him had been sucked away. Who was that child? And why did the mere mention of her father make him so uneasy? Something was terribly wrong, and he had no idea what was to come. The confrontation. He never expected how a simple girl revealed unimaginable secrets. Gabriel Montero had always believed that success was the greatest measure of happiness. After all, he was the owner of one of the largest corporations in the country, a billionaire recognized worldwide, living in a luxurious penthouse on the Upper East Side, surrounded by everything money could buy. But that morning, as he left a cafe on the Upper West Side, something prompted him to question everything. He had just wrapped up a call with one of his lawyers about the complicated proceedings of his impending divorce when he felt a light tug on his sleeve. He looked down and saw a girl of maybe 8 years old, with big brown eyes, staring at him with a disturbing curiosity. She didn't seem scared or shy. On the contrary, her expression was that of someone on the brink of an important revelation. "I know you," she said with a disconcerting confidence. Gabriel raised an eyebrow, his surprise quickly turning to confusion. "I'm sorry, but I think you're mistaken. I don't know you." The girl shook her head, as if he hadn't understood something very obvious. "Your picture is in my dad's wallet." For a moment, Gabriel froze. The girl's words hit him with the force of an unexpected blow. He tried to smile, thinking it might be some sort of childhood confusion, but the seriousness in her gaze left no room for jokes. "What do you mean, in your dad's wallet?" "I saw it yesterday. He always carries it with him," she replied without hesitation. Gabriel felt his heart race, and his mind began to work a mile a minute. Who was this girl's father? And why would he have a picture of him? The questions swirled in his head, each one more confusing than the last. "Who is your dad?" he finally asked, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "Diego Vasquez," the girl answered without missing a beat, her eyes fixed on him, as if waiting for his reaction. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but Gabriel couldn't associate it with any specific memory. He was a man who dealt with thousands of people daily. Diego could be anyone. But the fact that this child had his name tucked away in her memory, alongside a picture, made a feeling of discomfort swell in his chest. Before he could ask more questions, the girl's mother appeared, pulling her by the arm and apologizing to Gabriel. He waved distractedly, still processing what had just happened. But the girl continued to stare at him as she was led away, as if she knew something he couldn't comprehend. In the following minutes, Gabriel remained standing on the sidewalk, unable to move. The weight of that simple interaction began to sink in, and he realized he couldn't let it go. He needed to find out more about Diego Vasquez. He needed to understand what that girl knew that he didn't. Without further hesitation, he pulled his phone from his pocket and began making some calls. That name, that photo, everything was about to open doors Gabriel had never wanted to explore, but now he could not ignore. Something from his past was about to resurface with devastating force, and he knew his life, as he knew it, would never be the same. Unbeknownst to him, Gabriel had started walking aimlessly through the streets, trying to concentrate. But the image of the girl and her words echoed in his mind. He stopped at a corner, feeling the warmth of the morning begin to heat the surroundings, but inside him, a storm was just beginning. He knew he couldn't simply ignore what had happened. He decided he would find Diego Vasquez, no matter what it took to uncover the truth. Thus begins Gabriel's journey, where each step toward the truth reveals more about his past than he ever imagined. As the fog of mysteries around him begins to lift, he finds himself pulled into a whirlwind of revelations that threaten to destroy everything he has built. Now, it's up to you to decide whether Gabriel will face these ghosts or be consumed by them. The truth, however, will always find a way to emerge, and Gabriel would soon discover that nothing is as it seems. The following days were filled with constant unease for Gabriel. He couldn't shake the image of the girl from his mind, and especially the words she had said. There was something unsettling about that interaction, something that twisted his insides in a way he couldn't explain. Determined to find answers, Gabriel began investigating Diego Vasquez with the relentless diligence he usually devoted to business. He hired a private detective, someone discreet, who could rummage through Diego's life without drawing attention. The wait for results left him in a state of growing anxiety, something he wasn't accustomed to feeling. Gabriel had always been a man in control, used to manipulating situations to his advantage, but now he felt that control slipping through his fingers. One afternoon, while reviewing some reports in his office, the phone rang. It was the detective, with the first pieces of information. "Mr. Montero, I discovered who Diego Vasquez is. He briefly worked as an accountant at an auditing firm your corporation contracted about 10 years ago." Gabriel frowned, trying to pull from his memory any face or situation that would help him recall Diego, but he couldn't. "Are you sure he worked for me?" "Yes, sir. It seems he was fired under mysterious circumstances shortly after a tumultuous period in your company, when an internal audit revealed some irregularities." Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. There was a chapter of his past that he had always avoided revisiting. A time when his company nearly collapsed due to financial embezzlement that had been quickly suppressed by his then-partner, Alejandro Mendez. He knew something dark had happened, but he never wanted to delve into the details. What mattered was that the crisis had been overcome and the company moved on. But now, Diego Vasquez's name seemed tied to that past he was trying to forget. "I want you to continue investigating. Find out everything about him, where he lives, who he's with, everything." "Yes, sir. I'll be in touch soon." Gabriel hung up the phone and stared at the wall, lost in thought. Diego Vasquez. How could a man he couldn't remember have a picture of him in his wallet? What had happened 10 years ago that he didn't know? And why was this connection resurfacing now? The questions haunted him. He began searching through the company's old files, sifting through reports and memos from that time, trying to find any mention of Diego. But the more he searched, the more Alejandro's image began to emerge in his mind. Alejandro had been a close partner, a friend he trusted implicitly. They had weathered the most turbulent corporate storms together. But now, with this new information, Gabriel began to wonder, to what extent had Alejandro really protected him? Deep down, Gabriel knew he was about to open a Pandora's box. He was digging into something he would prefer to keep buried. But the idea of leaving this mystery unanswered consumed him. He needed to know the truth, no matter the cost. Days later, the detective returned with more information. "Mr. Montero, I found Diego Vasquez. He lives in a small town on the outskirts of New York, leading a simple, almost reclusive life. It seems he never fully recovered from being fired." Gabriel felt a mix of relief and tension. At least now he knew where to find him. But what would he do when he saw him? What would he say? He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to prepare himself for what was to come. Deep down, he feared what he might discover. But he knew he had no choice. He needed to confront Diego. He needed to understand how this man was connected to his past and why that girl said what she said. However, before confronting him, Gabriel decided to revisit the company records from that time, searching for any mention of Diego or any documents that could shed light on his dismissal. The deeper he dug, the more shadows he found. The truth began to emerge slowly, and Gabriel felt he was on the verge of discovering something that would forever change his perception of who he was and the people around him. The sleepless nights began to take their toll, but Gabriel pressed on. Every document, every email he found brought him closer to a point of no return. He was no longer in control of the situation. He was being swept away by a current he had set in motion himself. Finally, on a cold morning, while sifting through yet another batch of old files, Gabriel found an audit report with Diego Vasquez's name highlighted. The document seemed to have been forgotten, lost among unimportant papers. As Gabriel read it, he felt a tightness in his chest. The irregularities mentioned in the report, the same ones that nearly brought the company to its knees, were all attributed to Diego. But there was something that didn't fit. Everything seemed conveniently directed to blame him, as if he had been placed there to serve as a scapegoat. Gabriel felt a lump in his throat. He was beginning to realize that the story was much more complex than he had imagined. Diego Vasquez was not just a fired accountant. He was a piece in a much larger game, a game that Gabriel was barely starting to understand. But one thing was clear. The shadow of Alejandro Mendez loomed over all of this. Gabriel felt that he was about to uncover secrets that would force him to confront not only the past, but also the men he had trusted the most. And he knew that this could destroy not only his company, but also his entire life. Each new discovery brought Gabriel closer to the truth, but it also left him more terrified. He was digging deep into a past he would have preferred to forget. But now there was no turning back. The answers were close, but Gabriel knew that when he finally found them, nothing would be the same again. Gabriel braced himself for what would be one of the hardest meetings of his life. The small town on the outskirts of New York where Diego Vasquez lived felt like a world apart, distant from the luxury and hustle he was accustomed to. As he drove through the quiet streets, he felt a growing discomfort. The simplicity of the place starkly contrasted with the complex webs of power and money that Gabriel was used to. When he finally parked in front of a modest house, he took a deep breath. He was about to face a man who, in some way, was at the center of a mystery he still did not fully comprehend. Diego Vasquez, the accountant he couldn't quite remember, but who seemed to carry secrets that could change everything. Gabriel knocked on the door and waited, anxiety rising with each second. When the door opened, he found himself face to face with a weary-looking man, with gray hair and eyes that bore the weight of years of suffering. Diego looked at him for a long moment before speaking, as if he were trying to recognize the man before him. "You are Gabriel Montero," Diego finally said, without any surprise in his voice. Gabriel nodded. "I need to talk to you." Diego hesitated, but then opened the door completely, allowing Gabriel to enter. The house was simple but cozy, reflecting a life very different from the one Gabriel was used to. They sat down in the small living room, an uncomfortable silence hanging between them. "I know you must be wondering why I'm here," Gabriel began, trying to find the right words. "But the truth is, there's something I don't understand. Your daughter, Lucia, she said my picture is in your wallet, and that made me remember something from the past, something I'm trying to understand." Diego remained silent, his eyes fixed on Gabriel. It was as if he had been waiting for that moment for a long time. Finally, he took a deep breath and began to speak. "Lucia is a very observant child. She found that photo by accident, but she doesn't understand what it means. But I do. And now you want to know too." "Why do you have a picture of me?" Gabriel asked, his voice heavy with tension. Diego looked directly into Gabriel's eyes before answering. "Because you were the reason my life fell apart. 10 years ago, I was just an accountant trying to do my job, but I was dragged into a money embezzlement scheme that I couldn't control. I was coerced into taking the blame for something I didn't do. Gabriel felt a chill run through his body. "What do you mean by coerced? Who was behind this?" "Alejandro Mendez," Diego replied, the name slipping from his lips with palpable bitterness. "He orchestrated everything. He used his influence to put me at the center of the investigations. I was just a disposable piece for him. When the irregularities were discovered, he pressured me to take the blame, claiming that if I didn't, he would destroy my family." Gabriel tried to process what he was hearing, but the idea that Alejandro, his longtime partner, could be involved in something so vile left him reeling. "And you? Did you accept?" "I had no choice," Diego replied, his voice choked with the pain of recalling the past. "I was terrified of what might happen to my wife and daughter. He made threats, Gabriel, threats that I knew he would carry out. So I took the blame. I was fired, lost everything. My reputation was ruined and my life shattered. Since then, I've lived in this town, trying to rebuild. However, the scars, they never disappeared." Gabriel felt a wave of nausea. The man in front of him was not just a victim. He was the reflection of everything Gabriel had always feared becoming. Someone crushed by power and corruption. Someone whose life was destroyed for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. "I didn't know," Gabriel whispered, more to himself than to Diego. "I trusted Alejandro. I thought he was protecting the company." Diego looked at him with a gaze that mixed weariness with understanding. "You were just an ambitious young man, Gabriel. And Alejandro knew how to manipulate that. He used your trust to protect himself, to ensure that his own secrets remained hidden." Diego's words resonated in Gabriel's mind like a deafening bell. He had always taken pride in his intuition, in his ability to read people, but now he realized he had been blinded by loyalty to someone who, in the shadows, betrayed everything he believed in. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Gabriel asked, his voice heavy with a mix of anger and pain. "Because I was afraid. And to be honest, I didn't believe it would make a difference. You were on top, untouchable. And I was just a dismissed accountant without a voice. But now, with Lucia involved, things have changed. I couldn't stay silent any longer." Gabriel stood up, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He knew he had to do something, but what? The truth lay before him, raw and painful, and he couldn't just ignore it. Diego was not the culprit. He was a victim. And now, Gabriel needed to confront the true villain of the story, Alejandro Mendez. "I'm sorry, Diego," Gabriel said sincerely. "I'm sorry for everything you went through. But now that I know the truth, I will make sure this doesn't go unpunished. Alejandro will pay for what he did." Diego simply nodded, his gaze filled with cautious hope, as if he had been disappointed many times before. "I just want justice, Gabriel. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this for my daughter, so she knows that the world can be a just place." Gabriel left Diego's house with a massive weight on his shoulders, but also with a renewed determination. The truth was finally beginning to emerge, and he was ready to go to the end, no matter what that meant. Back in New York, Gabriel wasted no time. The conversation with Diego had ignited a fire within him, a desperate need for justice and to correct the mistakes of the past. But it had also brought to the surface a deep fear, the possibility that he might have been an unconscious instrument in the hands of a manipulator. Alejandro Mendez, the man he had trusted so much, now seemed more like a sinister shadow than the reliable partner he had always believed him to be. Gabriel began his deep investigation within his own company, revisiting old documents and analyzing every detail with a new perspective. He accessed records he hadn't seen in years, delving into files that almost no one else knew existed. With each new file he opened, Alejandro's image became clearer, but also more perverse. He discovered that Alejandro had created an elaborate money laundering scheme. Phantom companies were established, fake contracts were signed, and diverted funds disappeared into offshore accounts that should never have been traced. All of this happened right under Gabriel's nose while he was too busy expanding the business and blindly trusting his partner. One of the most devastating revelations came in a document detailing the creation of one of these phantom companies, registered in Diego Vasquez's name. Gabriel felt a tightening in his chest upon seeing Diego's name there, used without his knowledge, placed as a front in a criminal scheme that not only destroyed his career, but nearly destroyed him as a man. Gabriel continued digging, determined to expose every dirty detail of this scheme. What he found was even more alarming. Alejandro was not only using these companies to divert funds, he was involved in much deeper criminal activities, something Gabriel never imagined could happen within his own corporation. And then came the revelation that left him breathless. Lucia, the little girl who had initiated this entire journey, was, in fact, his biological daughter. Gabriel felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The report he found was written by Camila, a former colleague with whom he had a brief but intense affair before meeting Sofia. At the time, he hadn't known that Camila was pregnant. Now, suddenly, everything made sense. Diego had been Camila's husband, and the creation of Lucia was marked by the silence of Gabriel's past. This discovery hit him like a brutal blow. He tried to remember Camila, the woman who, for a brief moment, had been a part of his life, but whom he had failed to appreciate. Now, the face of Lucia, her large, curious eyes, took on a new meaning. She was the missing link, the connection between everything Gabriel had ignored and what he had become. Gabriel sat in his chair, feeling the weight of every wrong decision, every buried secret that was now surfacing to claim him. He was not just a successful billionaire. He was a man who had failed to see the impact of his actions, who had neglected the signs of what was wrong in his own life. Gabriel's mind spun with a whirlwind of emotions: guilt, anger, sadness. He knew he would need to confront Alejandro, but now that confrontation carried a new weight. It was not just about unmasking a criminal. It was about correcting the mistakes he had, even if unconsciously, allowed to happen. But Gabriel also knew that the next step had to be careful. He couldn't let Alejandro realize he was being investigated. That could jeopardize everything, including the safety of Lucia and Diego. He needed to be meticulous, precise. He decided that the best way to expose Alejandro would be to gather indisputable evidence, something that could be presented definitively and publicly. With that in mind, Gabriel began to gather all the necessary documentation. He used his position and resources to access hidden accounts, track transfers, and collect evidence linking Alejandro directly to the crimes. Each new piece of information he unearthed brought him closer to the truth, but also increased the risk. Alejandro was a powerful and dangerous man, someone who would not hesitate to use any means to protect himself. Amid all this, Gabriel felt the need to tell Sofia the truth. She deserved to know what was happening, but more than that, she deserved to know about Lucia. He prepared for a difficult conversation, knowing that this could be the definitive breaking point in their marriage. But there was no way to continue hiding secrets, not after everything he had discovered. When he finally sat down with Sofia, her expression already indicated that she sensed something grave was coming. Gabriel hesitated. The words caught in his throat, but he knew he could no longer wait. "Sofia, there's something I need to tell you. Something that changes everything." She stared at him, trying to read in his eyes what he was about to say. And when he finally told her, when he revealed that Lucia was his daughter, the impact was immediate. Sofia's face paled, and pain filled her eyes. The betrayal she felt was deep, but at the same time, there was a melancholic understanding. Gabriel knew she deserved more than he had given. "How could you hide this from me?" Sofia asked, her voice breaking with sorrow. Gabriel tried to explain, but the words felt empty. he knew that regardless of what he said, the damage was done. Sophia stood up, saying nothing more, and left the room, leaving Gabriel alone with his guilt and newfound responsibilities. The revelation about Lucia changed everything. Now, Gabriel had more than just a mission for justice. He had a responsibility to his daughter, a daughter he hadn't known existed, but who now needed to be protected at all costs. The evidence against Alejandro was nearly complete. Gabriel knew that the next step would be to confront him, to expose the whole truth, and to seek justice, not just for Diego, but for Lucia, for Sophia, and for himself. Gabriel knew he was walking a tightrope. The evidence against Alejandro was almost complete, but exposing what he had discovered would be a dangerous game. Alejandro had always been shrewd, and Gabriel had no illusions about what his former partner would be capable of doing to protect himself. Still, he prepared for the battle, determined to put an end to years of manipulation and lies. He scheduled a meeting with Alejandro at a discreet restaurant, away from the usual high society eyes. He wanted a neutral environment where he could gauge Alejandro's reactions without distractions. When Alejandro arrived, wearing the same confident smile Gabriel knew so well, he felt a mix of anger and sadness. It was hard to reconcile the image of the friend and business partner with that of the man he now knew to be a traitor. "Gabriel, what a surprise you invited me to such a modest place," Alejandro said with a hint of sarcasm as he took a seat. "We need to talk," Gabriel replied, straight to the point. Alejandro tilted his head, feigning curiosity. "About what, exactly?" "About what you did, Alejandro. About what you did to me, to Diego Vasquez, and to this company," Gabriel said, his voice heavy with gravity. For a brief moment, a shadow passed over Alejandro's face, but he quickly regained his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." Gabriel placed a folder on the table, filled with documents detailing Alejandro's scheme. "I know everything. The shell companies, the embezzled money, the threats to Diego. I know you forced him to take the blame for something you did." Alejandro looked at the folder but did not touch it. Instead, he crossed his arms and smiled, a cold smile that sent a chill down Gabriel's spine. "Do you really think you can take me down with that? These pieces of evidence are more than enough to expose you and end everything you've built, Alejandro." "This ends here," Gabriel said, trying to remain calm. But Alejandro was unfazed. "You've always been so naive, Gabriel. And that's why I've always been ahead of you. I knew that eventually you would discover something, so I prepared for it." Gabriel's heart raced. "What are you talking about?" Alejandro leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment. "Did you really think I didn't have a contingency plan? That I wouldn't protect myself? Gabriel, I made it look like you were involved in everything. I planted evidence pointing directly to you as the true mastermind behind the whole scheme." Gabriel felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "This is madness." "Madness?" Alejandro laughed. "It's genius. Who do you think they will believe? Me, the man who has always been by your side? Or you, who is now being accused of having a child out of wedlock and hiding it from your own wife? People love a scandal, and I've just given them a reason to believe you are the villain." Gabriel was left speechless. The weight of Alejandro's betrayal was overwhelming. Everything he had uncovered, all the truth he had fought to bring to light, was now turned against him. "You won't get away with this, Alejandro." "But I already have, Gabriel. While you struggle to defend yourself, I will be restructuring the company to ensure that any connection to these irregularities dies with you." Gabriel barely had time to react before 2 police officers entered the restaurant. "Mr. Gabriel Montero, you are under arrest on suspicion of corporate fraud and money laundering," one of the officers announced, pulling out handcuffs. Alejandro looked at Gabriel with a victorious smile as he was taken out of the restaurant. What Gabriel didn't know was that this arrest was just the beginning of a much more dangerous game. Alejandro had played his cards, and Gabriel was at the center of the trap. In prison, Gabriel faced hours of interrogation, surrounded by accusations he couldn't immediately refute. The media quickly picked up the story, and tabloids reveled in the fall of the magnate. Photos of Gabriel in handcuffs circulated everywhere, further tarnishing his public image. Sophia, upon discovering about Lucia and the affair, felt even more betrayed. She didn't know what to think anymore, and the shock of the scandal pushed her away from Gabriel, leaving him even more isolated. It was clear that Alejandro had managed to ruin not only his professional life, but also his personal one. However, Gabriel was not entirely defeated. There was a spark of hope. He knew that to shake off these accusations, he would need help, and that help came from an unexpected source. In the darkness of his cell, Gabriel felt more alone than ever. His thoughts drifted back to Lucia, the girl he barely knew but already felt an immense responsibility for. He knew he had to fight, not just for himself, but for her. The evidence he had collected against Alejandro was substantial, but now it was insufficient against the evidence planted against him. He needed something more, something that could turn the game around definitively. Then, the next morning, during a meeting with his lawyer, Gabriel received an unexpected visit. Diego Vasquez, the man he had confronted, appeared at the police station. With him was Camila, the woman with whom Gabriel had had an affair and who he now knew was Lucia's mother. "Gabriel," Diego began, urgency in his tone. "We believe in you. We know Alejandro set you up, and we are here to help." Gabriel felt a wave of relief, but also surprise. "But how? How can you help me?" Camila, who had been silent until then, stepped forward. "I have something that can change everything. For years, I kept some recordings that Alejandro didn't know existed. He has always been careful, but I made the mistake of trusting him in certain moments. These recordings clearly show his intentions and actions to incriminate Diego and embezzle funds." Gabriel looked at her, incredulous. "You have all of that? Why didn't you use it before?" Camila lowered her head, her voice heavy with guilt. "I was scared, Gabriel. Alejandro is a dangerous man, and I knew that if I revealed those recordings, he would come after me and Lucia. But now, after everything, I can't stay silent anymore, especially after finding out that you are Lucia's father." Diego intervened, his expression serious. "Gabriel, we need to get those recordings out of here and present them the right way. We can't trust just anyone. Alejandro has eyes and ears everywhere." Gabriel nodded. "You're right. We need to be careful." With the help of his lawyer, Gabriel managed to have the recordings analyzed by experts, who confirmed their authenticity. With this new evidence, he was able to secure a new hearing to overturn the charges against him and prove his innocence. But most importantly, this evidence was enough to definitively incriminate Alejandro. The media, which had initially reveled in the scandal surrounding Gabriel, was now about to shift its focus to Alejandro. During the new hearing, Gabriel, with a firm voice, presented the recordings. The courtroom fell silent as the evidence was laid bare, revealing the truth behind Alejandro's scheme. Alejandro, always so confident, watched his world begin to crumble. He tried to refute the evidence, but it was irrefutable. The shock on his face was evident as he realized he was cornered. With the new evidence, Gabriel was exonerated of all charges. His freedom was restored, and his honor slowly began to be reclaimed. However, the public revelation that Lucia was his daughter brought additional complications to his relationship with Sophia. She was still hurt, and Gabriel knew it would take time to heal those wounds. Alejandro, on the other hand, did not have the same fortune. He was arrested, and all his fraudulent actions were exposed to the public. Alejandro's downfall was swift and ruthless, and Gabriel knew that, at last, justice was being served. But this victory came at a high cost, and Gabriel was aware of that. After being freed, Gabriel met again with Diego and Camilla. He thanked them for their support and for having the courage to come forward with the evidence that changed the course of events. Camilla smiled, although there was still sadness in her eyes. "Now you have a new chance, Gabriel. A chance to make things right." Gabriel knew she was right. The next step would be the hardest of all, to rebuild his life, his reputation, and above all, his relationship with Lucia and Sofia. Gabriel Montero was back at the place where it all began, but now he was a changed man. Alejandro's fall had unmasked the real villain of the story, but the scars left by the battle were still deep. He knew that although he had managed to restore his freedom and honor, there was still much to resolve, especially regarding Lucia and Sofia. After Gabriel's release and Alejandro's arrest, the media quickly shifted its focus to the scandal involving the former partner, leaving Gabriel largely in peace to try to rebuild his life. But he knew he needed to do more than just return to normal. He needed to reconcile with his family, especially with Sofia, who was still struggling to understand and accept everything that had happened. Gabriel decided that the best way to start was by being honest and open with Sofia. He arranged a meeting with her at a place they used to go during their early years of marriage, before everything became so complicated and distant. Sofia arrived hesitantly, and Gabriel could see the pain still present in her eyes. He knew this conversation would be difficult, but he also knew it was necessary. "Thank you for coming," Gabriel began, his voice calm yet laden with emotion. Sofia nodded but remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I know the last few weeks have been devastating for you, and I know I was responsible for much of what happened," he said. "But I'm here to be honest with you, to tell you everything, and to try, in some way, to rebuild what we lost." Sofia sighed deeply, looking at him with a mixture of sadness and exhaustion. "Gabriel, you hurt me in a way I never imagined was possible. Everything we thought we knew about each other, it seems like it was an illusion." Gabriel lowered his head for a moment, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand, and I'm sorry for not being the man you deserved. Sofia, I didn't know about Lucia, didn't know about Camilla, and if I had known, I would have done things differently. But now, knowing what I know, I want to be present for Lucia, for you, if you'll allow me." Sofia looked at Gabriel for a long moment, trying to find the truth in his words. "And what about her? And what about Lucia? What do you plan to do?" Gabriel knew that this was the central issue. "I want to be the father she deserves. I want to be present in her life. And I know that won't be easy. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn her trust and, if you'll allow me, yours too." Sofia wiped away a tear that had rolled down her cheek, feeling the sincerity in Gabriel's words. "This will take time, Gabriel. I can't just forget everything that has happened, but at least I'm willing to try, for her, and maybe for us." Gabriel nodded, feeling a small spark of hope. "That's all I can ask for." As Gabriel and Sofia tried to rebuild their relationship, another challenge was approaching. Gabriel received an anonymous envelope, something that put him on immediate alert. Upon opening it, he found a photo of Lucia, along with a simple yet disturbing note. "She will always be my daughter." The handwriting on the note was unmistakable. It belonged to Camilla. The impact of the message was clear. Despite everything that had happened, Camilla was not willing to let go of Lucia. Gabriel felt a new wave of tension. Camilla had been missing since the evidence against Alejandro was exposed. He didn't know where she was or what she intended, but the tone of the note suggested something darker. Gabriel knew he couldn't ignore this threat. He needed to protect Lucia, but at the same time, he didn't want to push Camilla away for good. He decided that the only way to resolve this was to find her, understand her intentions, and, if possible, seek a peaceful solution. He began a discreet search for Camilla, using all the resources at his disposal. After several days of uncertainty and tension, Gabriel finally managed to locate Camilla in a small town in the countryside. He knew this meeting would be decisive. When he finally found her, Camilla looked different, thinner, with tired eyes, yet still holding on to the strength that Gabriel remembered. They sat in a quiet park, where the conversation could take place without interruptions. "Why did you send me that photo?" Gabriel asked directly. Camilla didn't avert her gaze. "Because Lucia is my daughter, Gabriel. I raised her, took care of her all these years, while you didn't even know she existed." Gabriel felt the weight of guilt, but he also knew he needed to be firm. "I know you raised her, and I'm grateful for that, but now I know she is my daughter too. I want to be present in her life. I want her to have the father she deserves." Camilla took a deep breath, her expression softening a bit. "I don't want to take her away from you, Gabriel, but I need you to understand. Lucia means everything to me. I had to hide, disappear, to protect myself and her. Alejandro was dangerous, and I did what I had to do to keep her safe. And now that he's out of the way, what do you want to do?" Gabriel asked, his voice low but filled with determination. Camilla was silent for a moment, looking at the horizon. "I want what's best for Lucia. Maybe that means letting her have a life with you, but I need time. I need to understand how this can work." Gabriel nodded, understanding the difficulty of the situation. "I don't want to rush anything. I just want Lucia to have a full life, surrounded by people who love her." Camilla smiled sadly. "You're more like me than I thought, Gabriel. I just want that too. Maybe we can find a way to do this together." The tension between them began to dissolve, and Gabriel felt that for the first time, he was truly connecting with Camilla in a meaningful way, as parents, with a common goal. They spent hours talking about Lucia, about the future, and about how they could find balance. Camilla was still cautious, but there was a growing understanding that they needed to work together to ensure Lucia's well-being. Gabriel returned to New York with a mixed feeling of relief and responsibility. He knew there was still a long road ahead, both with Lucia and with Sophia. But he also knew that, for the first time in a long time, he was on the right path. The final confrontation with Alejandro had unmasked the darkest secrets of his life, but it had also opened the door to redemption. Gabriel was determined to use this new opportunity to be a better man, a better father, and, who knows, maybe a better husband. Lucia was the key to all of this. She was the bridge between his past and his future, and Gabriel was ready to build that bridge with care and love. As he watched the sunset from his penthouse, Gabriel knew that the journey was just beginning. But this time, he was prepared to face any challenge that came his way, with the certainty that, no matter what happened, he would never again be the man he once was. And so, with new hopes and challenges ahead, Gabriel Montero began a new chapter of his life, where the past and the future intertwined, and where he was determined not to repeat the mistakes that nearly destroyed him. The journey would not be easy, but he knew it would be worth it. We hope you enjoyed this narrative. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more touching and emotional stories. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. We would love to hear what you think, and feedback and critiques are also welcome. See you in the next exciting video. Until then,